Hello everybody, I am Tom and you will watch me play Destiny 2. So, I did clickbait you in the title, but I'm not going to do it in the actual video. The perk I'm talking about today is Collective Action. So, the things I want to discuss about this is why I think it's overlooked right now, why I think it will be better compared to other things when it comes to the final shape, and I want to actually do some comparison between it and some other damage perks going into the final shape. So, first of all, what is Collective Action, in case you are unaware? Whenever you collect an elemental pickup or throw a strand tangle, you get a period of increased damage. Elemental pickups include Fire Sprites, Void Breaches, Stasis Shards, Ionic Traces, and Strand Tangles. So the actual specific buff you get here is a 20% damage buff for 7 seconds, and every other pickup you get will give you an additional 7 seconds of time, up to a cap of 12. So it is worth noting that you actually have to throw a Strand Tangle, not destroy it. Makes it slightly less good for Strand, but all the other elemental pickups you just run over them and pick them up, and as soon as you pick them up you get this 20% damage boost. Now, is this overlooked? I feel like this perk is relatively overlooked. I don't hear anybody really talking about it. I certainly don't really use it. However, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some niche of Collective Action enjoyers who are using it all the time and I'm just not paying attention. That's possible, and let me know if it is, but since this perk's come out, I've kind of just been ignoring it, simply because elemental pickups are kind of hard to get rolling. Like, occasionally you're going to get this perk, but occasionally isn't enough. You have things like Frenzy, which you can have up pretty much 100% of the time. Frenzy is a lower damage at 15% rather than 20%, but you can have it up 100% of the time. Whereas Collective Action, aside from a few kind of niche cases, you're not going to have it up as much as you have Frenzy up, therefore 15% all the time is better than 20% some of the time, if that makes any sense. So there's a couple of things I want to look over when we actually, review this perk. Specifically, there's 3 aspects. You have Potency, Ease of Use, and Uptime. So for Collective Action, the Potency is 20%. This is a kind of low to mid-range power bump compared to other selections you can have for damage boosts. Ease of Use, however, you need to pick up a elemental pickup. So the ease of use is directly dependent on how often your build is creating elemental pickups. The more you generate, the easier it is to use. You don't really have to think about it if you're generating enough elemental pickups that they're just constantly coming to you, right? And it lasts, as I said, 7 seconds for every elemental pickup, and it's refreshable up to 12 seconds at a maximum. So again, depending on your elemental pickup generation, you could have infinite uptime, or you could have barely any uptime. It just depends on how many elemental pickups you are actually doing. So it's pretty clear that the more elemental pickups you're generating, the better the perk becomes. Currently, there are a few builds where this perk is already pretty damn good, notably Arc Warlock, because they just generate so many Ionic Traces that the perk is up all the time. It's essentially 100% uptime when you're doing Arc Warlock, because you get so many Ionic Traces rushing back to you. The footage in the background is particularly that. I was trying out Collective Action, so all the footage in the background is just me playing around on Arc Warlock. The other notable one to me is probably Stasis Titan, just because they generate, again, so many Stasis Shards. So you're going to have close to infinite uptime on the perk. And if you get infinite uptime on the perk, it's just a strictly better Frenzy, right? It's 20% rather than 15%, so it's pretty good if you actually have the generation. So I'm sure a lot of you have already cottoned on to what I'm assuming about this perk, which is that it's going to get much better in the final shape because of Prismatic. When we're using multiple subclass verbs, it means we're going to be creating multiple elemental pickups, which means you're going to be generating them way easier, and it might just become trivial to generate elemental pickups. And if we're generating enough of them, as I said, as long as you're doing at least one every 7 seconds, you have infinite uptime on this damage perk. Assuming that when we're using Prismatic, I think the elemental pickups are going to be trivial to create. So I think that's why this is going to get so much better in the final shape. Next up, I want to actually compare Collective Action to other damage perks. Not all of them, obviously, because there are a lot of damage perks in the game, but the ones where it's probably in most competition, or at least what I think is its biggest competition. So firstly, we have Collective Action, as I went through before, 20%, which is a low to mid-range kind of damage perk for Potency. It's very easy to use. You just need to pick up a elemental pickup. Uptime, however, is determined by how many elemental pickups you can create. As I said, in the final shape, I think this is going to be quite a lot. So I think this could end up being essentially, specifically on Prismatic, almost a 100% uptime perk. Next we have Kill Clip, which is a 25% damage buff, which is slightly above Collective Action. I would say this is kind of at the mid-range of damage buffs. You need to reload straight after a kill. If you do so, it's an easy thing to proc. The problem is it only lasts 5 seconds and it can't be refreshed. What this means is, essentially, you're usually going to only get 1 or 2 kills worth of the damage perk before you have to reload your gun again, and firing, reloading, firing, reloading, firing, reloading isn't a particularly fun way to play. So kill clip is definitely one of those perks where it's much better in PvP, where killing one enemy and getting a perk to help you kill the next enemy is very useful. It's still useful in PvE, the issue is the 500 enemies that are behind that second enemy you kill, right? Going from one kill to the next is fine, it's just all the ones afterwards the perk isn't that helpful with, right? Next we have Rampage, which is easier than kill clip in PvE, because all you need to do is get kills, you don't need to do any reload. So all you do is get kills and you get buffs. The potency for Rampage is it stacks 3 times, you get 10% for the first kill, 21% for the second kill, and 33% for the third kill. It also works when it's stowed, which is quite nice. You can move off your kill clip gun and go back on, and as long as you're within the time limit, it will still be up. The time limit being 4.5 seconds, which is quite a short damage window for Rampage. It's worth noting too that because you actually need to get a kill for both kill clip and Rampage, they don't scale to high end enough, because you start to get to the point where getting kills quickly isn't as trivial as it is in kind of the mid to low range. When the enemies are tanky enough to live all your shots, that 4.5 seconds becomes much more of a problem. It's much harder to keep it up when you've got to actually secure the kill. Next up, we have Frenzy, which is 15% damage buff, which is definitely in the low end of damage buffs. It is worth noting though that Frenzy also gives you a reload bump and a handling bump, which is also, that's ancillarily useful as well. Also, the ease of use of Frenzy. The reason that Frenzy is consistently given as one of the best perks is because it is so easy to use. All you need to do is be in combat, quote unquote. What this means, either shoot or be shot by an enemy for 12 seconds. And that in combat stance runs off after 7.5 seconds. So if you haven't shot anything and haven't been shot in 7.5 seconds, you'll drop the buff. This essentially makes Frenzy 100% uptime, 15% damage boost. At most, you're going to have about 12 seconds at the start of the fight where you don't have this, but most encounters, that 12 seconds is negligible. You pretty much just have 15% damage boost if you have Frenzy on a weapon. That's the reason why so many people like this perk. Also, the reload speed is also quite nice. But the main reason is because the ease of use of the damage boost. 15% for nothing is very, very good. Next up, we have One for All. Now, One for All is a 35% damage boost, which is on the higher end of damage boosts. So it's a very good damage boost. It also doesn't require you to kill anything. All you need to do is hit 3 separate enemies. That's pretty damn good. Specifically, the higher end content you do, the better One for All gets. Because the harder it is to secure the kill, the better One for All becomes, because all you need to do is hit 3 separate enemies. And also 35% damage boost as, again, very good number. I think One for All is actually kind of slept on. There's a few people who, yeah, One for All is great. Dado constantly singing the praises of One for All is a very good damage perk. However, some people just don't like the fact that they have to pay attention to it all the time. Specifically, you can't re-proc it. It lasts for 10 seconds, you then have to shoot 3 more enemies to proc it again for another 10 seconds. I think if One for All was refreshable, and went up to 15, 20 seconds total time, it would be pretty much the best damage perk in the game. But because you have to kind of pay attention, it makes it just annoying enough that people don't like using it. You kind of have to be looking at your buffs, wait for the 10 seconds to drop off, shoot 3 separate guys to get the 10 seconds again. You gotta keep doing that every 10 seconds, right? And that little bit of annoyance is enough to make people not use it, I think, which is kind of funny, but at the same time, I get it. It's just slightly irritating, and that's all it takes for people not to want to use it. Next up, we have Multi-Kill Clip, which is a 17, 33, or 50% damage boost, so kind of mid to high range. It is potentially a very high damage output. Again, the problem it runs into is exactly the same as Kill Clip and Rampage, though. You have to get kills for this to work, so it doesn't scale super well. It actually scales worse than Kill Clip because you need multi-kills. You need to get 3 kills within 3.5 seconds to actually get that big 50% damage buff. Low to mid content, multi-kill clip is fantastic, but it really doesn't scale much higher than that. The damage buff you actually get is 5 seconds, so assuming you can keep your multi-kills going, it will actually replace the buff. So every time you reload, it will replace your buff. So if you get 1 kill, if you have the 50% buff, and you get 1 kill then reload, it replaces it with the 17% buff, which is actually worse than refreshing. If it just refreshed, again, it would be very, very good. Multi-kill clip is in a weird place right now. I feel like it's fantastic for low-end content, but you don't need anything specific for low-end content. You don't even need a damage perk for low-end content. You may as well use one of the more fun perks, because everything just falls over so quickly that you don't need a perk for it, so it's And then finally, I want to talk about Golden Tricorn. Golden Tricorn is a potentially very high range damage boost. It is 15% off the rip, and then you get 50%. And the way this works is when you get a weapon kill, it gives you a 15% damage buff for 7 seconds. And within that 7 seconds, if you get an ability kill that matches the element of the gun, then it extends the buff and it makes it 50%. It's a hard buff to use in a lot of content. Really, you need an ability spam class to be able to use it, which Prismatic will be, worth noting. It seems like Prismatic is going to be relatively easy to spam your abilities. So maybe Golden Tricorn will just end up being the meta for it, but the ability that you get the kill on has to match the element of the gun. What this means is that Prismatic might not fit so well because you have a lot of ability uptime, but the abilities are all from different elements if you're using Prismatic effectively. So, again, harder to work into. In general play, keeping the 50% buff is pretty hard. The 15% buff is relatively easy. As I said, it's just get a kill. But it's nowhere near as consistent as Frenzy, so it starts to kind of pale in comparison. A 15% buff that you have up half the time, that then can potentially go to a 50% buff for 10% of the time, isn't as good as just having a 15% buff all the time. You know what I mean? Again, it's a similar thing with One For All. It is finicky enough to use and kind of annoying enough to pay attention to that people don't like using Golden Tricorn. Again, potential higher ceiling, but ease of use brings it down a fair amount. But that's all of them. So as I said, I'm thinking collective action might be the way to go as we go forward. I want to know your thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments. I reckon collective action will start to be a lot more relevant with Prismatic. Assuming, of course, there is a caveat to all of this as well, is that they actually put collective actions on weapons that people actually want to use otherwise. Because if it's not on the weapons, obviously people aren't going to be using it, right? But in any case, I think that's it. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you aren't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Thanks guys, and I'll see you all in a few days for the final shape. What's the date today? 31st I'm recording this, so we've got 4 days left. Ooh, nearly there. See you guys.